Thank you for joining us this afternoon for our webinar on the NEON Research Support Services Program, or NRSS. My name is Melissa Tennick, and I'm a program analyst with the NRSS team, supporting kind of in the back end of all of our NRSS projects. I'm also joined by a few of my team members today, including Matt and Ramel, and we will all be here to answer questions here at the end. Before we begin, I want to say that NEON welcomes contributions from everyone who shares our values of unity, creativity, collaboration, excellence, and appreciation. This is outlined in our Code of Conduct, and these guidelines apply to all NEON staff, as well as anyone participating in any NEON programming. Our Code of Conduct can be found on the NEON website or through the QR code on the screen. The NEON Research Support Services Program, or NRSS, was formerly known as the NEON Assignable Assets Program. The program was renamed in July of 2024 with concurrence of the NSF. We feel this name better outlines the support we provide to our external researchers and partners. For a brief overview of what we'll be talking about today, I'll start off with a quick summary of what NEON is. Then we'll jump into an overview of the NRSS program. We'll talk about the program's growth over the year. We'll show how one can request support through the NRSS program and what that request process looks like. And then we'll end with some example projects that we have supported over the years. Right, to start off with, we'll provide an overview on the National Ecological Observatory Network, or NEON. NEON is a continental-scale, long-term observatory fully funded by the U.S. National Science Foundation and operated by Battelle. Data collection, methods, instrumentation, and data processing are standardized across the observatory and provide a reliable framework for research and data aggregation. All NEON data is freely available through the NEON Data Portal, which can be found at the link here below. NEON is the first of its kind. It's an observatory that's distributed across the continental United States, including Alaska, Hawaii, and Puerto Rico. NEON collects data over broad spatial and temporal scales to enable the understanding of key drivers and responses of environmental change. NEON has a total of 81 field sites. 47 of those are terrestrial and 34 are aquatic, and they're distributed throughout 20 ecoclimatic domains. NEON provides a highly coordinated system of fair and open data for monitoring critical ecological and environmental properties. And all of our 180 plus data products are freely available to everyone. The intent of the NSF is for NEON to be operational for 30 years. NEON began full operations in 2019. But as the observation was being built, some sites started collecting data early, so some of our data products are available as early as 2016. The figure on the screen now shows our different domains across the country, with the blue dots being our aquatic sites and the green dots being our terrestrial sites. NEON data are collected using 3 different systems. We have our automated instrument systems, which collect meteorological and eddy covariance data from our towers. We also have data from our phenocams, our soil sensors, and different ground and surface water stations. We also have observational sampling, which encompasses all of the observations and physical samples collected by our field ecologists. And this can range from small mammal trapping, tick, mosquito, ground beetle sampling, vegetation structure, soil samples. We also have our airborne observation platform. There, we use remote sensing on our light aircraft that carry instrumentation payloads that are able to gather LiDAR, photo, and hyperspectral data. All NEON data is freely available on our data portal that can be accessed at data.neonscience.org or at the QR code that's on the screen. The data portal is where one can explore and download any of our 180 plus data products. And you can access our data directly from the portal or through an application programming interface. Some of the data products are also available at our partner organizations. For example, our eddy covariance flux data packages are also available through the Miraflux website. The data portal also provides access to user guides, detailed protocols, theoretical bases, and important documentation to understand the data. As any data is updated or as any data products are updated, that can also be found on the data portal. This figure here demonstrates NEON by the numbers. So as of December of 2024, NEON has about 600 total staff. About 320 of those support the observation full-time. And seasonally, we hire an additional 250 to 290 domain staff to help with field sampling and data collection during the busy growing season. We have over 180 data products, and we have collected over 500,000 physical samples to date, adding about 100,000 physical samples each year. On the lower left-hand side, you see what our physical infrastructure looks like. We have 3 payloads that our AOP group control has. We also have 47 flux towers, 57 water quality stations, and so on. Something that we're excited to highlight are the numbers in the lower right-hand side, demonstrating how many publications over the years have leveraged NEON data or resources. As of December of 2024, we have had over 1,400 publications using our data. As I close out this overview on NEON, we'd like to say that good science is built on good data. But in addition, we also like to think that good science is built on good data and creativity, and its opportunities, like our NRSS program, which allows the community, you and other users of NEON, to bring your creativity and ideas to our observatory. Now I'll talk about an overview of the NEON Research Support Services Program, or NRSS. The NRSS program makes available certain components of NEON's infrastructure, scientists, engineers, field ecologists, and technicians to members of the community to support their own research interests or other activities. The NRSS program has several guiding principles. It is designed to leverage NEON infrastructure for community engagements. Projects in the program are evaluated to avoid conflicts with NEON's mission and scope. This includes making sure that it avoids interfering with current NEON measurements or sampling, and at the same time, avoiding interference with other NRSS-supported projects. All work through the NRSS program is supported on a cost-recoverable basis, and this is because we cannot use NEON operational budgets for any external projects. So project support costs need to be recovered through the investigators' grants or fundings. I will also note that this funding model is from the NSF for NEON. Other NSF research infrastructure may have different funding models. Every request that gets submitted to NRSS goes through a process of evaluation. This process of evaluation includes a feasibility and technical review. There we bring in folks from our science team, folks from field science, subject matter experts, to look at what you're asking of us to do, and to see if it's feasible with the infrastructure that we have and the personnel that we already have. Following that, we take the request through a thorough cost analysis and pricing of the project. And if funding for a project is available and the project is ready to be implemented, the NRSS team will establish a contract or work agreement for the request. There are 7 core services that we provide and support through the NRSS program. They're all listed here in the next couple of slides. I'll talk about them in a little bit more detail. But on the left-hand side, we have our observational sampling infrastructure, OSI. We have sensor infrastructure, SI, our airborne observation platform, AOP, the mobile deployment platform, MDP. On the right-hand side, we have our field coordination requests, our subject matter expertise, and then letters of support and collaboration. To start off with, I will cover briefly what can be done under our OSI, or observational sampling infrastructure. Here, folks can have access to our field sampling plots, as well as our trained field ecologists for additional sampling and data collection. Sometimes we can add NRSS projects to regularly scheduled NEON work. Other times we'll have specific trips that will go out for your project and for your ask. We also have the sensor infrastructure requests, or SI. This is our physical infrastructure at the sites. So the tower, the instrument hut, access to power and communication, our soil arrays, and our aquatic stations. An example of leveraging this resource is, say you have a new instrument or sensor that you're trying to test across different ecosystems, or you want to, collect your data next to NEON data and see how well they align. We can work on an SI project for you. Up next, we have the Airborne Observation Platform, or the AOP. Here we use our Twin Otter aircraft, where folks can request flight surveys using this aircraft and its remote sensing platforms at either existing NEON sites or at their own research locations that they specify. We have 3 instrument payloads that are able to be used. The Mobile Deployment Platform, or NDP. These are essentially mobile NEON towers with a subset of terrestrial and aquatic sensors that can be deployed to remote locations to collect NEON-like data. So thinking kind of similar to the towers that we have, but you're able to move them to specific sites where you want data collected. And we have 5 MDPs that are ready to deploy if they're not under contract. Up next, we have field site coordination requests. So these occur when researchers want to do research adjacent at or on our NEON sites, but don't really need access to the sampling plots or any physical infrastructure. They definitely wouldn't need any labor or field support. Typically for these, I recommend folks to think, if the PI's team will be doing the work, that'll generally be a field site coordination request, where we, as the NRSS team, can help you get connected to domain managers to make sure you aren't interfering with any NEON work, but you will be collecting the data on your own. Something to keep in mind is that NEON does not own the land where our NEON sites are located. So through field site coordination, we can facilitate contact between the researcher and the site hosts to ensure that all research permits and site permissions are acquired. And we can also connect you to domain managers in order to make sure that is complete. Something to keep in mind, it is up to the PI or external researcher to obtain their own permits and permissions. We also have subject matter expertise, or SMEs. So something to keep in mind, NRSS is more than just the physical infrastructure, mobile platforms, and our sites. What truly makes this program successful is our group of professional field ecologists, scientists, and engineers. All of our field ecologists and team members are fully trained on NEON protocols and equipment, so they can answer any questions that you may have over the data that is being collected. They're also there to provide subject matter expertise on various subjects dealing with NEON data and how data is collected. So say you're looking at a data product, you're not 100% sure what that metadata means, and you need somebody to guide you through what is available. Or say you have an idea for a project, but aren't sure if there is data already available within our data portal, we can connect you to a subject matter expert to navigate those pieces. In addition to the requests that I've already covered, NRSS also handles all letters of support and collaboration from the NEON program. Something to note is that if your proposal is only using data from the data portal or resources that NEON already provides, such as educational materials or training videos, you generally will not need a letter of support for NSF proposals. But we're more than happy to work with you for any sort of letter of collaboration you may need, regardless of what agency you will be submitting to. And those also go through an evaluation process, making sure that we have the capabilities and the expertise to support your efforts. There's also a couple of unique NEON resources that are associated with NRSS. We have the NEON Megapit and Distributed Soil Archives. These are accessible soil archives from the initial characterizations of all NEON terrestrial sites. And we also have the NEON Biorepository, which is curated by Arizona State University. The biorepository houses the long-term storage and curation of most NEON samples, including voucher specimens, whole organisms, tissues, and samples that are collected and processed for chemistry, disease, and genetics. Generally, NEON analyses will be conducted first, and then those materials will be stored. I encourage folks to visit the biorepository website, which can be found on the screen here, to see what kind of samples it has to offer. Something to keep in mind, sometimes we have folks that leverage the NRSS program and biorepository samples. We are happy to put together letters of support or collaboration that leverage resources at both locations. The NRSS program is truly customer focused. There are 3 main phases when an investigator has an idea for an NRSS project. There's phase 1, or that planning phase. This is where we work with the PI and their team to understand the project and the need and support for the effort. We work together to define project goals and the scope, and then also seeing if we can come up with a feasible schedule that'll work with when neon sampling is occurring, but that will also answer the scientific questions you may have. Here, we also begin to understand the potential costs of supporting a specific project. Phase 2 is the agreement phase. So typically by phase 2, folks are hearing back from the funding agency or body to see if there is money for their specific project. And there we finalize the scope, schedule, and budget. And if needed, we'll establish a contract or work agreement. Many times between phase 1 and phase 2, there's definitely a time period that you're waiting. We're more than happy to go through iterations of ideas as you're kind of waiting for an answer. Then there's phase 3, or the implementation of a project, and that occurs when a contract or work agreement is in place and we can actually start executing the project in the field. Each phase has aspects of other phases, so there's a lot of interaction and iteration. Rarely does someone come in with a phase 1 idea and then we directly go into agreement. We want to make sure that you are having your scientific questions answered, but at the same time that we're staying true to the NEON mission. Something that you'll notice is that the investigator is central in all aspects of the process. So we work closely with each investigator and each team to ensure that their project is feasible and can be successfully completed. We identify expertise of folks in the field that we can connect with specific projects. So there's always a line of communication between the PI and what data the NEON team is collecting. By focusing on investigators' research needs, we've had and continue to aim for a positive community response. On the next page, I'll show you how the program has grown over the years. On the slide, the x-axis shows award year, and the y-axis has the number of requests. And this graph shows the number of project requests per award year, and this is being demonstrated as award year, as this is how we do our reporting. From 2016 to 2023, the NEON award year was from November 1st to October 30th. But in 2024, the NEON award year was shortened by 1 month to align with Batel's fiscal year that ended on September 30th, 2024. So you see an asterisk above award year 2024 to show it's only 11 months. You can see there was a near linear growth from award year 2016 to 2020. And just a quick reminder that NEON wasn't fully operational until 2019. So even prior to full operations, there has been interest from external folks who work at NEON sites and to leverage observatory resources. You see that slight dip in award year 2021, and this was due to the heavy impact of COVID. During award year 2022, we saw a return in the number of requests, but there was still it was still slightly lower than we were expecting, and we're thinking that is, again, due to the impact of COVID. Award year 2023, requests exceeded all previous award year requests. And then in award year 2024, we saw a drop in the number of requests, but then again, noting that it was shortened by 1 month. If it was standardized to include that extra month, the award year 2024 requests number would be 72. So far in award year 25, we have had 34 NRSS requests. And this data shows only NRSS requests. So in addition to NRSS requests, we're also having letters of support requests at the same time. And for those for award year 2025, we're at about 36. The increasing number of requests is, we believe, really driven by NSF funding solicitations, increased visibility of NEON, our community engagement efforts, and ultimately our users' research interests. These tables here demonstrate the total number of awards coming from different funding sources and then the services that are requested. The left table shows the number of project requests and the identified sources of funding where they're requesting it from or where they've secured it from. To date, we've had more than 438 NRSS requests. And as you can see here, NSF is by far the #1 source of funding requests. Many of folks coupled that idea with the opportunity for the macro system solicitation. And while that solicitation is no longer available, there are other avenues within NSF for you to leverage NEON resources. Following NSF, you see university funding and NASA funding driving a lot of these project requests. Following that, we have private funding and then several mixed kind of money buckets. There's also been 6 requests with funding identified as coming from foreign entities, which is interesting to note. On the right table, you see the services that are requested. And you'll see that there's a difference between the total project requests and the number of services requested. And this is because folks can request more than one service for a specific project. So for example, someone can request some observational sampling and then couple it with sensor infrastructure sampling. Or let's say they want to do some of the work on their own, so they'll maybe couple it with some field site coordination. The observational sampling infrastructure is the most requested service, followed by the sensor infrastructure. We're seeing an increase in field site coordination requests as folks are realizing that they can do additional or supplemental research at NEON sites that are beneficial to their research, and they would be the ones that would be doing it. We also get a few AOP requests for flight surveys, and this includes flights over NEON sites, but then also through non-NEON areas. We've had 17 MDP requests, and we've also received 4 requests for subject matter expertise. For that subject matter expertise number, I'd also like to note that since the beginning of data collection, we have had over 600 letters of support and letters of collaboration requests. Many times within those documents, they do request subject matter expertise. So it may not be captured here under this specific service, but folks are leveraging our experts through the letters of support. Right, so there are a lot of really great services that we do provide. Up next, I'll talk about how you can request services and what the processes associated with that look like. On the screen right now, there's a QR code that'll take you to the Research Support Services webpage. There we have documents for you to request one or multiple research support services. On that webpage, we currently have web-based request forms for our OSI, SI, AOP, and MDP projects. The requests for field site coordination and letters of support are web-based, and we're actively working to get all of the forms updated to be web-based. In the meantime, if you are interested in SI, OSI, AOP, or MDP work, download one of the Word documents and then email them over to us using the email here below at researchsupport@battellecology.org. And as you are filling out those documents, feel free to reach out to that email to have any questions answered that you may have. We're also happy to chat with you about any specific questions you may have before you fill out the documents to see if we align and if our services could be beneficial to you. Each request form has questions that allow us to start understanding the proposed project. So this starts off with information on the PI and contact information. We want to see a project overview so we can understand the scope, location, dates, the funding status or sources, as well as any additional information that will help us understand how NEON would be supporting your project, or what are those resources that are being requested. If you have an SOP that you're working on or have already created and you'd like to implement it at NEON sites, please send that over. During those feasibility conversations, we like to have as much detail as possible. If you have an idea of which domains or sites you want to work at, identify those. And keep in mind that even as you are putting this request in, things can change. You may have to pivot. We're all very familiar with having to pivot for research projects, and that's okay. This is an open channel for communication. We can help you launch what you are looking for. Lots of folks reach out to us and they're kind of worried about their project details not being completely solidified when they submit their proposal, when they submit the request form. That's not a problem at all. We anticipate plenty of conversation and collaboration with you, and we know that there will be iteration. These discussions are critical for us to understand your research project, and it allows us to work with you to ensure you really have that support you'll need. So even if it's early, we encourage you to come to us with your ideas, especially if you're unsure of if we're able to implement the work that you're thinking of, or if we have instruments for your specific idea. We aim to create a plan for all requests that come in, as long as it is feasible and cost effective. And again, emphasizing when you know you'd like to make a request, we recommend completing the form as much as possible and submitting it to us. Having at least kind of clear initial goals and requirements is very helpful for us to start those conversations. It's helpful for us to know if you're flexible in your request, or if you're looking for NEON input on how to best implement something, or trying to see if you're looking to align your work with some of the NEON schedules. The request form is not thorough by any means. It's just kind of this initiation of the request process. We always follow up with many different questions, set up meetings one-on-one with the PI and their team. We really want to make sure that we are discussing your project and needs and trying to meet them as much as possible. Right. Next, I will talk about what that request process looks like and kind of key things to keep in mind as you are going through this process. Here is a simplified process that an NRSS request would go through, and this is the same for any NRSS request, regardless of scope, project size, institution, or agency. All the requests will go through the same process, regardless if they're OSI, SI, AOP, or MDP. We'll also have versions of these processes for letters of support and field site coordination requests. We're seeing on the screen here is going to be a process for a research project that is currently seeking funding from an agency such as NSF, NASA, USDA. The initial conversation starts when that researcher submits the appropriate request form. That's why we say submit as early as possible. Let us know that you're interested. Let us create a unique identifier for you so we can kind of continue on this journey with you, and we can answer any questions that you may have as you are developing those ideas. Once that request form is submitted, we evaluate the request and conduct a feasibility review and cost analysis. There, again, as I've mentioned, we bring in folks from our science teams, from our field teams, from our permitting teams to see if what you're asking for is something that we can actually do. We also create a budget estimate during this time. During that budget estimate, we try to see what is the maximum amount that we anticipate having to charge for the work that we will be completing. Following the review, we send results and the budget to the researcher. And then during this step, many times we'll have iterations with the researcher on the scope and the cost. We want to make sure that you're well aware of how much this would potentially cost, so you can include that in your budget for the proposal packages that you are submitting. Once the scope of work and budget is agreed upon, the researcher then submits that proposal to the agency for funding. And many times, between step 1 to step 5, lots of things can happen. Many times this is a long period of time, can be up to 6 months. You may have different ideas for other projects that you want to implement. We're more than happy to evaluate other requests that you submit. So let's say we've waited those 6 months and we have positive feedback from that agency. At that point, we move on to step 6. And this is where we as NEON and the researchers, we work to finalize that scope, details of the deployment or implementation. We finalize the budget, and then we set up the contract for the work. We would also like to know if at step 5, if you're notified that funding has not been received or that you've not been selected for funding. And again, this is because we track every request that comes in. We'd like to know if there's additional support we can provide, or if we may have to potentially pivot in order for you to secure that funding for your work. As we are going through that contracting process in step 6, I'll talk about this again, but keep in mind, it doesn't happen very quickly. We have the Battelle contracting process that we have to follow, but then most often we also have your research institution's contracting steps that we have to follow. This can take sometimes about a month or 2 to get a contract in place. So as soon as you have the results or notification of funding, we recommend for you to connect with us, and then we can start that contracting process, even if that means that maybe field implementation doesn't occur right away. Once that contract is in place, we then move to the implementation of the project in the field. Another thing I'd like to note here is we can't start the day that the contract is in place. We want to make sure that our field teams have the support that they need, have the personnel that they need, are able to implement your requests within their schedules. So I generally say about 6 weeks following the contract establishment, should you expect to have field implementation. And there's nuances between all different kinds of projects. Some, the scope is a lot smaller, it can move a little bit more quickly. Others, where we're helping develop the protocol and things like that, there may be a little bit more of a wait time. Here's a shortened version of the figure I just showed, and this is where a researcher already has the funding in place. The process is still the same, minus waiting for the agency to approve the funding. But keep in mind, even here, as we are defining that contract, it does take a little bit of time for that contract to come into place, and then also for us to go from contracting to actual implementation. We have some guidelines on our website for timelines for processing NRSS requests, and these are general, but we want to make sure that everyone has the correct expectations for how quickly we can implement a project. If you're seeking funding, we request that you submit your application at least 6 weeks prior to the proposal submission deadline. And we understand that most researchers don't have their full proposal package finalized 6 weeks prior. And that's okay. We would like to start the conversation with you as early as possible. So as your proposal changes, we can also adapt here on the NEON side. We want to have that NEON portion of your proposal done as early as possible. If you have funding secured and would like to move towards a contract and implementing your project, we also ask that you submit the request at least 8 weeks prior to the proposed start date of the collection. And again, there's a few notes there that assumes that you've worked with Battelle or NEON before. We assume that you already have the correct permits or permissions in place. And that accounts for how long it takes us to get our field teams ready, as well as the contract in place. And there are reasons why the process is so lengthy. Overall, it takes time to iterate with a researcher on the scope of work requirements, making sure that we can support the proposed project. Something that I have a conversation with requesters right at the beginning is that permitting can take a lot of time, and that it'll look different for almost every site that you're looking to do work on, or have us collect samples for you. There are different permissions and permit requirements depending on the location, and some of those can be collected pretty quickly. Others, you may have to wait a couple of months. It is important to note that permitting is a responsibility of the requester, so folks should really be aware of those timelines and start that conversation really early. This is often overlooked. And folks, they get their contract in place, we're ready to start implementing, and then one of our implementation leads asks about permits and permissions, and those may not already be in place. And that can kind of delay a project. So we really want to make sure that we're starting that conversation early. And as we send over letters of support or rough orders of magnitude, we will include information on how to get access to our sites. As I've already mentioned, the contracting process takes a long time, typically a month or more. It really depends on how quickly the Battelle and the external research institution, how quickly they can agree on terms and conditions of a contract. And then, as I've mentioned, we don't want to overwhelm our field teams. We want to make sure that scheduling is possible. Keep in mind, our teams are usually busy with NEON work, so we want to make sure that we can coordinate their efforts to meet NEON needs, but then also collect data for external NRSS projects. And something fun about NRSS is that each request is completely unique and has its own site and project-specific challenges. Each time we have a new NRSS project, it's typically kind of like a new project, and we're starting from scratch. So we want to make sure that we create a strong contract to make sure that everybody's needs are met. We want to make sure that our field staff is ready to collect the data and that communication is occurring between us and the investigator. And we understand that sometimes opportunities just kind of pop up or happen without notice, and we may have to move a little bit more quickly. We completely understand that, and we ask for you to connect with us as soon as possible, and we will try our best. Keep in mind that many times in the pipeline, we have multiple requests at one time, and we want to make sure that we respect the order that the requests came in. So I'll emphasize it, as I already have. Reach out to us and submit as early as possible. Awesome. And now for some fun parts. We've talked about the process. We've talked about the services that we can provide. Now I'll talk about some example projects that we have completed or are actively working on, so you can see what the scope of possibilities looks like when working with NEON. We're going to show a few different examples here. These projects are either funded by NSF or other funding agencies or sources such as NASA or other agencies. And these examples use various NRSS services with various levels of support and support costs. Okay. So this first project is a simple and easy to implement long-term and low-cost project. The project was from the Hawaii Department of Natural Resources and the University of Hawaii, and they wanted to mount a pair of bird tracking antenna to the top of one of our towers. The state of Hawaii is reintroducing a native bird, and tracking these birds is critical to see if the reintroduction is successful. They wanted to install these tracking antennas to our tall tower structures, so they have expanded tracking range. After installation for this project, there really isn't a lot of maintenance. Their data is automatically collected and then sent to them for analysis. So this project is anticipated to remain on the tower for as long as NEON is at the site. And this is an example of a very low involved project. On the right-hand side, you see some information on the projects, and this will be the case for all the examples I provide. So to get an idea here, we're working on one site there in Hawaii, and this is a long-term project, but very low involvement, and NEON support costs are less than $5,000. The second project I'll mention requires field installation support and collector maintenance across multiple NEON sites and multiple years. This group is studying fungi and dust, and we help to deploy collectors at 20 of our core terrestrial sites. They requested more than one service. So they requested sensor infrastructure and field site coordination. And this is a really good example of leveraging existing NEON resources and support across the observatory. So for this project, we were at 20 different terrestrial sites for over 3 years of work, and NEON support costs are approximately $27,000. The third example is a project that uses multiple services where the investigators were interested in solar-induced chlorophyll fluorescence, or SIF, measurements. The main service that was requested here was sensor infrastructure for the installation of the photo spec on the towers. They also requested observational sampling and some field ecologist time to do monthly conifer needle sampling around the tower area. They requested some field site coordination, as they were able to do some of the needle sampling on their own at additional sites. So here it's for a duration for about 3 years with a NEON support cost of about $17,000. This next request looks at through-fall and stem flow across multiple NEON sites, 11 of them. For this project, we support it with research coordination, development of sampling protocols, and installation of sampling equipment across our sites. This project is tricky and labor-intensive, as it requires our field teams at 11 sites to track storms and deploy collection buckets before major rain events, collect the samples after the event, and then clean and prepare the equipment for use again. This is a great example of using the distributed nature of NEON site and leveraging our existing NEON personnel for intensive field deployments and sampling. This also demonstrates NEON's ability to work on creating protocols with your teams. And for this project, we're working at 11 forested sites for approximately 4 years of work and a NEON support cost of around $900,000. This next example came in as a request from Colorado State University, where they were looking for a single mobile deployment platform to be used at 2 different locations. This project was the subject of an NSF Rapid Award where researchers wanted to augment and integrate edge computing hardware into the NEON MDP so that the MDP would be ready to study wildfires. The project had 2 phases. The first phase was testing and integration of the equipment and sensors into the MDP. And then the second phase of the project was to deploy that MDP to a contained Colorado wildfire. And though there were many wildfires in 2022, we were unable to get appropriate access and permissions to deploy the MDP during a contained wildfire. So keep in mind that permitting and permissions do take time. So here we had to pivot and arrange for an MDP deployment at a controlled burn. So after the pivot, the phase 2 was in collaboration with the Kanza Prairie Biological Station in Domain 6, where they were conducting prescribed burns. Because this was a prescribed and controlled burn, we were able to deploy the MDP before they burned to gather pre-burn data. We operated the researcher equipment during the actual fire, since their research question did involve fire detection. And then we kept the MDP there for a short while after to collect post-burn data. This was a rare opportunity to be able to have equipment present and not destroyed and ruined during a fire. During the burn, the researchers live streamed what was occurring, the data that was being collected. And then here on the slide, there are links to different videos of the different phases. And so the sites for this project, they were non-NEON locations, but we collaborated with folks in Domain 6 to be able to collect the prescribed burn information. And the NEON support cost was about $130,000. And then the final project I will talk about is an example of the use of our Airborne Observation Platform, or our AOP. So this project was in collaboration with another NSF-supported project called BB Flux, standing for Biomass Burning Flux Measurements of Trace Gases and Aerosols, and was the subject of an NSF Rapid Award in 2018. For this project, NEON flew the AOP over 4 burn scars in the western United States shortly after wildfires occurred. We did a blog post on these efforts, which can be seen here. And then the support costs for this project were about $184,000. And I'm sure all of these project ideas got you thinking about, what else is available, what other services have we provided. Many of our NRSS supported projects are posted on our website. We do ask PI permission to display, but if you scan the QR code that's on the screen right now, you're able to see other projects that we're currently implementing or have implemented in the past. And I think that's a kind of fun way to wrap up this informational conversation. If you have any questions about anything that we have talked about today, please feel free to reach out to the NRSS team directly at researchsupport@battellecology.org, or feel free to use the general NEON email address that's on the screen right now.